Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paula Mugisa. I am the founder and team lead of TESA Advisory Services. We are a business development firm that offers solutions to micro, small, and medium enterprises that are both new and existing. We offer digital solutions, online business courses, online business coaching, and a few other things to support local entrepreneurs enter products and services into our market. Thank you.
Thanks, Paula. We go to Phyllis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chomendo Phyllis. I am a director and co-founder at Smes Uganda. We are developers of low-cost mobile ultrasound devices that connect to a laptop, phone, and tablet, and these enable us to go to different areas and carry out much-needed ultrasound scans on pregnant women who cannot access the conventional ultrasound machines.
All right. Next, we have Luge. Is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah, that's fine. My name is Teddy Rouge, founder and CEO of Raintree Farms. We are a value-added processor of moringa products, and we're based in Masindi. I'm also the co-founder of Hive Collab.
Great. And next, we have?
Good afternoon to you all. My name is Emmanuel Kojo Mensah. I work as the Monitoring and Evaluation Officer for MobiPay AgroSys Limited. I'll call my company as an agri-fintech with a focus on providing digital solutions that helps the partners along the agricultural value chain to use technology to assess data, to make informed decisions, as well as also working with youth at the producer organization level for them to be able to support the last mile distribution channel. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, colleagues, for your introductions. And before we probably talk about what the next decade should look like for entrepreneurs, I would want us to briefly tell us about how the pandemic has impacted our different kinds of works that we do. And in reference to how we have always known that pandemics all over have always been accelerators to innovation. And this has been evidenced by the number of companies that we have looked at, both international and locally. The Microsoft, the A&Bs, and ETC definitely took advantage of so many recessions that they were founded in, and they have proved to be resilient and even thrive. Locally here in Uganda, we have also seen a number of both small, medium, and big companies doing their best in the pandemic. So maybe we could start with that. How have we been resilient? What has the pandemic been like for our different kinds of work before we talk about how the future will be shaped like? And I will start with Phyllis. Phyllis, how has the pandemic been, and have you had challenges, or it has been an opportunity for you to scale and thrive?
I strongly believe that challenges and adversity are the very foundation of innovation, which is what we are into. And so as much as the pandemic has been a challenge, it has also opened so many opportunities for us. I'll speak on behalf of the social innovation sector because so many of us are used to working in the field. We go out to communities because that's where our work lies and that's where our impact lies. So because of the pandemic, we couldn't reach our people. We couldn't reach our beneficiaries, and we had to find a way to help them regardless of the situation. So it helped us pivot in ways that we did not expect and come up with products that if it wasn't for this challenge, wouldn't have come up with. So it accelerated the level of innovation that we do, and it accelerated the other ways that we could help even other beneficiaries that we couldn't think about. MSCAN during the pandemic shifted from just a social innovation into a company that also is reaching out to urban mothers, because we're always looking at rural mothers. We suddenly realized that also urban mothers need help. So many mothers reached out to us and were like, hey, I cannot go to the hospital for fear of getting COVID, and yet my next scan is due. Can you come home? And then that's when we thought about the home-based care. So right now we're moving into home-based care, where we move to people's homes at a fee. And because it's a single person going to see a patient, it's easier to observe the COVID SOPs, and we are able to help these mothers as well. This is a model that we are now trying to adjust to fit even the rural areas. Instead of using a car or a motorbike, the health workers could use maybe a bicycle. So yeah.
Great. And Rouge, how has it been at Raintree Farms? Has it been the same, or you've had to do a lot of pivoting?
We absolutely had to do a lot of pivoting. It's no joke that it forced, COVID separated those people who were pretending and those who were serious about their businesses. If you were serious, then you spent your nights and days pivoting and trying to figure out how do you make your business survive. 95% of our business was focused on export of raw materials, essentially first grade processed like moringa powder or moringa oil as a volume product. But without the ability to export, because external markets began closing down before we did, actually, because COVID didn't really hit us until late March. But by February, external markets were closing, whether it was for real or just preventive measures. So that meant we needed to figure out how to survive as a business, but we had to look at it and decide, okay, we have the commodity side of the business, we are unable to do that side of the business, what can we do on the retail side of the business? So that's when we launched a new brand called Kwezi Beauty, and I think some of you have seen it maybe. But I had a fear of, okay, now we've shut down, exactly how are we going to get these products into customers' hands? But turns out everybody was at home and everybody was online. That was a positive shift in helping at least usher in a little bit, put our one foot into the digital economy, at least a little bit. And we were very successful actually advertising on social media, etc., because that's where everybody was. And we ended up establishing a fairly good customer base, and that really encouraged us to continue expanding the brand. And I think if I look more broadly at the economy and the benefits of COVID, I think it pushed us very much off of our comfort zone, where we are more comfortable doing business in person, to now doing business online. And I really, you have to look that as a positive, because I think more broadly we have a discomfort about the digital economy, about changing our norms and our haggling and our ways that we purchase things into trusting an online environment where we can actually, you don't get to see your vendor, but you just get to trust that the system will work. And I think that forced a lot of people to be able to survive, because the vendor has to be, because that was the only avenue to sell. So trust was the currency for them. So, they couldn't afford to cheat customers out of that. So, so for us, that was, the best thing going forward. But it also allowed us to look at the business on how we balanced in terms of revenue streams, to make sure that we're well prepared for such pandemics. And I think anybody who didn't take advantage of that, I think it would be a missed opportunity.
That's right. Right. Emma, or Emmanuel, we know that agriculture has been one of the sectors that probably thrived during the pandemic, during the quarantine and the lockdown, because here locally in Uganda, our president said farmers must continue. So tell us, how has it been at MobiPay? Have you had a blast, or it has been the same as us who are in fintech, who are in e-commerce and all that?
Thank you. I think the opportunity that the pandemic provided could be looked at in two ways from the side of an agri-fintech. It's quite easier to think that all technology companies were making a boom, but the key thing will be on who are your main customer base, and then how are they able to access the digital devices. Okay, so if you look at MobiPay and other agri-fintech, for example, our major customer segment is the rural smallholder farmers who tend to, access agricultural input extension information from our services. And it was quite interesting in the sense that at one point, we had to now make sure that our farmers are able to use our platforms to be able to access inputs, the information, and we're as well partnering with other government and development partners to disseminate COVID information, which of course will help the people. And so one of the ways that we could help the smallholder farmers was for us to build up on our model that we call the digital community entrepreneur model. So basically we recruit youth at the producer organization level who work with the farmers. And so in the case of us to help the farmers to access input, solar equipment and the phones, which are very important for them to access the relevant value-added services, now we have to use the blended approach of where the farmers or the youth were aggregating things that are needed by the last mile population, and then they could do the delivery. And so it opened up the opportunity to bring on board a blended approach, but also to rethink how best can we have innovations that can meet the needs of our last mile population.
Great. We shall dive into that discussion because I'm going to ask how that blend has been going. But Paula, I know you're representing the BDS organizations, which even us who are entrepreneurship support organizations like hubs, co-working spaces, and all that are. But I would want to hear from you. You know, most of these entrepreneurs who have been coming to you for the services were locked up, so they didn't even have what to pay you. So how have you survived?
Thank you, Gilbert. It has been very interesting for us because unlike many other companies, we are very fortunate to have been extremely busy during the COVID season, and that's because TESA's mandate at the start was to support MSMEs, and we found that the way BDS works in Uganda is through traditional consultancy. And so what happened in our first 12 to 18 months of operation is we were mainly serving medium enterprises, not micro and small enterprises. So towards the end of last year, no idea of COVID, we just simply realized that we should aggregate all of our tools and resources and some of the things that we believe are achieving our clients' results onto an online portal. Again, no idea of COVID. So we started making that transition, aggregating the content, building it, and so on. And we launched our first maiden online business course tailored for Ugandan businesses in February, and then COVID hit. And we had our first free module out. The first 10 days, I think 400 entrepreneurs had come to just get that free module to revise and use a design thinking approach to their ideas. And those are many of the entrepreneurs that we continue to work with. And now we had a platform, very basic, very simple, that we're now renovating and revising to be up to par, but very basic platform that now had resources that were 20 times less the price of traditional consultancy. So we added what we felt were practical resources, and then business coaching, and then ended up working with so many entrepreneurs who the main thing we were selling to them, rather than business frameworks and everything, was a change of mindset, which I think is what COVID exacerbated. It forced us to ask the right questions and make the right realizations that we ought to, like in MSCAN's case, of products and services we could enter into the market that could then lead to revenue streams. So that has been exciting to see. Because then entrepreneurs realized that it was all up to them. It was all about how they were thinking about the problems and themselves and what they could offer. And so it opened up this wide range of people like the ones in this room Everyone has an idea, from all of the tech guys here in the front to the guys in the back end to the businesses. Everyone has an idea of how they think they can impact the community around them. And so what our tech did is simply just show them the possibilities and give them the frameworks.
Okay, so colleagues, we all understand, or would want to agree that there was a bit of adjustment in what all of us were doing due to this pandemic. And the same applies to the other bigger stakeholders that we know in this entrepreneurship ecosystem, including the government, including government partners, including funders, those who have been giving us money and all that. So I would want to throw this to all of us, and any can take it on. What do these adjustments mean for an entrepreneur, especially Ugandan entrepreneur? We've heard from E regarding what he thinks Africa can provide in the next decade, but what do some of these, especially economic adjustments, mean for us entrepreneurs? Phyllis, you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll take that on because during our training in Outbox, we used to hear words like lean startup and bootstrapping.
Zulu, you need to pay for this advert.
We used to hear about bootstrapping and lean startup, and at that point in time, it's just a point to note, like you're just writing notes. Until COVID hit, then you actually had to know what lean startup is. You had to find a way to meet your team without physically meeting because one, there was COVID, and two, probably didn't have the money to make a proper meeting or to meet funders or something. So we had to really find a way, and I know most of the entrepreneurs also had to find other ways to carry out their day-to-day activities, but spend so much less. And there's something called a runway that most startups are supposed to apparently have. So I would say apparently because people don't think about it until disaster hits. We're making a joke that COVID made us realize that each startup needs to have a ministry of or department of disaster preparedness. Because suddenly you're in this predicament that you know might happen again, and the runway you've always told your funders you had, you actually do not have. So those are the adjustments I think most startups have had to make to actually go by the books and apply the things they've learned along the way.
Rouge, you talked about something earlier on how the pandemic was able to differentiate between serious entrepreneurs and unserious entrepreneurs. And earlier before we came, I was sharing with Paula, and I was as well telling her that somehow, this pandemic came just to also show that us entrepreneurs have been so comfortable in the so many opportunities that we had. So what do you think about that, Rouge?
I don't know what country you live in where even without a pandemic that, it's comfortable to do business in Uganda, but it's not. The pandemic just made it, really, really worse in terms of being able to survive, and really, and I agree. You don't know what runway means until you essentially run out of it, because you may treat the revenue that is coming in as we have money that is coming in and it can run the business, so it doesn't force you to think about runway when disaster strikes. So when COVID hits as something similar, you have to be really, really creative, and that's why I said earlier, it really separated the people that were serious about entrepreneurship versus those who were not, because COVID forced you to really sacrifice. If you want your baby to survive, you have to make some, serious sacrifices. And by the way, speaking of runway, because COVID shut down a lot of things, it didn't mean that suddenly your expenses were a lot less. They're not. They're exactly the same. Just because you're not paying transport to the office to have that meeting, you have to pay for the digital infrastructure to have that meeting. So the costs essentially remain the same in a way for a lot of the businesses, but I think survival meant just essentially that, just being creative and how exactly that you do succeed. But going forward, I think that also forces a lot of people to think about the health of their business. If one little pandemic can down your business, are you really structured for survival? Have you set up your business model the correct way? And anyone who didn't take that downtime to actually look at their business model and take that time to actually adjust it for survival missed a huge opportunity there.
Paula.
Let me just add
Sure.
what the pandemic means to us. I think one of the things that we learned during the pandemic was from the tech side, there was a glut of innovation. A whole lot of innovations were coming up, and so it appeared we have what we call the red ocean. Basically, a fewer or the majority of the tech were competing for space in order to be relevant and also raise revenue. And so for us, it became important to look at how do we create a new demand and also make the competition kind of irrelevant, okay? Because if I have an e-learning platform and then he also has an e-learning platform and everybody is fighting to use that platform, then definitely to go to one person, depending on your coverage area. Mm-hmm. And so if you have another way of blending something with your digital innovation, then though it appears that you are competing with him, but you're also creating a new demand for your service to be used. I think one of the things that we've learned during and what the pandemic means is how do you make the kind of competition irrelevant by having a new demand. And that helps you to also look at how do you lift value for the buyer or your customers. And then definitely you may need to either operate at a lower cost than what you've been doing at first.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Paula, I want to ask, if you had COVID-20 coming next, and I don't mean the real COVID that we're in, but something close to COVID or like COVID, may not be a health problem, but something else, where would it find our entrepreneurs?
That's a very good question, and thank you, Gilbert. And it really depends. Like in all games and in real life, there's always winners and losers, and unfortunately, less winners and more losers. But again, it depends. It really depends on mindset and the questions that we are asking ourselves. I think, again, what COVID taught us is simply to ask the right questions. I think, there could be COVID-20 for us here in Uganda. We're going into elections, and there's a lot of things going around that. And so many other things are happening in our local economy and globally, which will shift the landscape for any entrepreneur and any business of any size. And so what that means is we always kind of have to adopt we have to adopt the mindset of future pacing. So what are we doing now that is working, but that might not work next year, or that might not work in February, or that might not work, 3 years from now? I think it really depends. I think we stand a fantastic shot if our local entrepreneurs are asking themselves the right questions, applying critical thinking, and then acting and executing. Unfortunately, what we have seen is the culture of our entrepreneurs is we ask less and we do more of what we perceive the other person to be doing successfully, which is a huge mistake and something that we should move away from. Of course, I like to apply a positive mindset, and I hope that we can, with discussions like this, move further away from the copycat mentality to asking questions, critical thinking, and then executing. Yeah.
Awesome. Most definitely, we've lost some of our great entrepreneurs. I don't call them great because I think they try to be resilient. But I'm asking, now that we've seen a shift in a number of ways that we operate, some have been temporary and most definitely some will be permanent. So we are looking at what are some of those ways that entrepreneurs may probably or should actually permanently adopt to. And we link this to our theme of this Campaign Innovation Week, where we're talking about recovery and resilience. And maybe to reference it to the previous panel that was hinting on digital transformation. I mean, the digital trend taking up the next decades. I'd want maybe one of us to share his thoughts or her thoughts about what do you think are those permanent ways that a Ugandan entrepreneur must adopt to.
I would like to start,
Sure.
if that's okay.
Sure.
Super keen on this.
Great.
We've coached a lot of entrepreneurs. Not to be too repetitive, but again, it's centered around mindset.
Yeah.
One of the things that I saw, which was I was completely peeved by at the start of the pandemic, is a lot of the message that was coming out from the media and everywhere is like, okay, so the pandemic has come, we need masks, we need sanitizers. So like all youth, we should all be making masks and sanitizers. I just felt that it was not practical, realistic, or sustainable. Yeah, I felt like that way of doing business where we're telling the entrepreneur to go out and look into the market at the myriad of things that they could do and choose one is not sustainable. I really believe that the Ugandan entrepreneur must start with some sort of awareness of themselves. I know a lot of millennials are now going into personal development, which I think is such a huge component of understanding, first of all, what your interests are, what skills you bring to the table, what value you bring, then go out into the market and plug into those markets or industries or people you want to serve, leverage technology, and then scale. I feel like roughly, maybe with a few other things, but roughly, I feel like that's kind of the trajectory that Ugandan entrepreneurs, both existing and new and aspiring, should be kind of trying to work towards.
Phyllis?
Yes, I'll pick off what Paula said. I think it's all about mentality. The one thing that we have to maintain after this pandemic is the mentality of flexibility. We cannot afford to be stuck in our ways. If you wake up and say MScan has to be like this, I created it like this, it's not going to adjust for anyone or anything. It's not going to take us anywhere. And like you said, maybe COVID-20 or any other disaster that's going to come, we have to be prepared. We have to make sure that our product fits the market. Product market fit is not something set in stone. It will change almost every day or every week or every month or every year, you do not know. But stick to your product. It's not like she said, you don't need to wait for maybe COVID and say, oh, now I'm no longer doing MScan, let me run and make sanitizer. And then maybe something else hits and you'll go like, let me go and make maybe hose or something, I don't know. It's not like that. Get your product, and it's not true that your product cannot adjust according to the times. MScan could adjust to be useful in any kind of situation depending on how free you are to innovate. Open your mind, be flexible, be willing to innovate around the situation to make sure that your product stands the test of time.
Rouge, maybe Rouge, before you answer that, I just got something in my mind. We've been going through several industrial revolutions, and we are proud to say that we are in the fourth industrial revolution. As you...
Are we though?
as you come in, are we ready for the digital transformation that they want us to shift to, or we should shift to?
We cannot have the next 10 years if we do not have a concerted shift to embracing the digital economy. We just can't. There's no way to look at and be future thinking about the resilience and survival of your business without a digital component on how do you survive. Because that's the highway that better connects you to all of the customers that you could have. I like to use the term, made famous by this American hockey skater. When he was asked, he was like, how are you so good at hockey? It's because I skate to where the puck is going to be as opposed to where the puck is. So we need to be thinking about where our customers are going to be in the future as opposed to where they are now. Right now, the challenge, there is an actual, visible challenge with us accepting online purchases. We are kind of halfway there in actually doing online transactions. We still prefer to go to the DMs and transact as opposed to actually going to the website and making that transaction happen. And I fully understand that, because for most of the market and your addressable customer base, you have to look at the limitations of payments online. Yes, Flutterwave is here, but it's also, has to navigate the fractured payments landscape. While it may be able to process Airtel payments, it doesn't currently have MTN payments, which most of the customers are going to have. And those challenges of actually being able to meet customers where they are is where you have to be very creative in how resilient you are and how are you responsive to the current crisis. We are, dealing with the aftermath of COVID-19, but we don't have to guess about is there a COVID-20, because in Uganda we already have it. It's called the elections. So you have to be resilient in figuring out how do I still reach my customers and how do I stay very creative in solving the whatever problem comes on. The challenge with us in terms of being able to quickly respond is that we are a culture of followers, essentially, and this roots itself in our education system. We pump out children who follow instructions. We don't teach children to solve problems. We teach them to copy paste. We teach them to memorize and regurgitate. That's it. So when they're faced with something that they've never faced before, they're kind of paralyzed, and we're all paralyzed is because we don't know who to copy. In terms of getting our solutions out, it's difficult to do that when someone else is innovating in their business, and then you're trying to do it, to innovate in your business. It means you don't understand your business and how to respond and pivot for your customer base and be able to actually get there. So I think if we are very self-aware about this situation, and he asked previously is, how young are we? We have to look at what the next 10 years involves and what we need to invest in, both from government and private sector, to make sure the next 10 years are fully transformative to get to the fourth industrial revolution. That conversation is for developed countries. You can't talk to me about fourth industrial revolution here in Uganda when we can't even keep the electricity on. It doesn't run on air. It runs on infrastructure that has to be there. We don't have that infrastructure there. So let's focus on building that out. That includes making sure that people who are going to participate in the fourth industrial revolution are educated and sensitized enough and have the skills to survive in the digital economy, which powers the fourth industrial revolution. That means overhauling our education system to create people that create as opposed to people that copy and paste. We have to start there if there's going to be any kind of us reaping from the potential of what the digital economy and the fourth industrial revolution over the next 10 years offers for this country.
Right. Thank you so much, Ruth. That has been so articulate. Emma, do you want to add into that before we get into our closing remarks?
Yes, I do agree with the other speakers in terms of the skill set, your ability to be innovative enough to have a product market fit. And I would also want to emphasize on what Rush said. The aspect of the skill set is very important. And so you will need to have the category of developers or innovators who are able to ask the question that makes the problem go away. Okay? If you cannot ask a specific question that helps you to address the needs of your customer, then you definitely cannot be able to have a product market fit. That means definitely you also not have that revenue stream to survive as a business entity. I have a lot of interest in gender, and so I would want to mention that as we move forward to the next decade, and let us have policies or strategies that is much focused on the girl child, but also our ladies. If it is a short-term project like what Refactory and then Makerere Innovation Centers have been doing, look out for the ladies, help them to build, their skills in software development or other relevant areas like my sister is doing. I'll be glad to ask how many of the ladies are you working with, and how do we help to bring them on board so that they can also make a meaningful contribution. Otherwise, it may look like we want to focus on helping people to build their skill set, but we are leaving a lot of the ladies and the women behind. So that is another key focus area, that in whatever that we'll be doing to help entrepreneurs, it should be gender responsive, so that the aspect of equity is also taken care of. Thank you.
Now, you bring a discussion that I didn't want to start, but I'll throw this to Phyllis and Paula. In all that we have done, and I'm sure you can attest to that, that every time we want to bring on board our sisters, I mean, what is the challenge? What do we need to do to bring our sisters to this ecosystem, especially when it comes to digital innovations? Or is there a challenge that you think we can solve right away from the beginning? You know, it could be a process, but what do you think could be done right away to bring our sisters on board?
I'm happy to.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting, our market dynamics locally, if you study them, especially from a business development standpoint, and again, trying to support female entrepreneurs to participate more. If you start from the traditional consultancy, standpoint, which is commonplace in Uganda, that market is heavily dominated by men. 96% of our customers for the 18 months we were formally operating that customer were men, because they are holding much of the capital in this economy, right? So we had a plan and a nice, cute little business model of how to onboard women. The first 30 businesses to sign up for our online business course were all women. If there is an opportunity that they understand and they are shown what is possible and they're being encouraged to do it, the sky is the limit. 15 of those between March and now have entered a new free or paid product or service into the market, many of whom are formally employed as well. So if we're bringing down the cost of business development services, explaining that to them in a way that they understand and showing them this is possible and you can do it, the sky is the limit. So we have pivoted our business for the third time in less than 3 years, because 81% of our customers are women, and now those are the ones that we're going to serve.
Wow. I didn't know that actually happens. I'm looking for 70% of my or my participants, my programs to be women, but I'm struggling. Phyllis?
Yes, I will take it from a grassroots standpoint.
Yeah.
And I believe so much in training the girl child when they're still young. We human beings, as much as we won't want to accept, are very visual. When you see something, you gain inspiration.
That's right.
I keep telling teachers biology would be so much easier if they could take us and be like, okay, the flower is this one, and then when you open it and they open and we see, and it grows like this and this and this part, more than drawing it on the blackboard and then pumping us with notes.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
We are very visual. The same way we cannot encourage women to enter the tech space or any space we want them to enter by telling them, hey, we encourage you to enter. It will not work. It needs trailblazers or women like Paula and others who are already in the space to show these ladies, or to reach out to these young ladies in school and tell them, hey, I am a lady, I made it through like this, and I am successful. When they have someone to look up to, it's so much easier. So for me, that's the approach. We have to show them how to get up there.
Rouge, you seem to want to add on something?
Well, yes. I think on our part as men, we have to be very self-aware. We have to focus on the patriarchy that we enable and be able to break the norms. Where you don't see women in your industry or programs, it needs to be a concerted effort to actually recruit them, to make sure that it's okay. And as she has said, it's important to have examples that role models that other women can follow, that they can look up to and actually be able to say, oh, that's actually possible, and allow them to enter that space as opposed to constantly thinking that some programs or entities are only for men. I think as for men, we have to recognize our own bias in that situation.
Can I just add something really quickly, Gilbert? Just
please.
because it's a really important conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, on top of, like Rouge said, recognizing that, you know, whatever project, event, activity you have there, it would be nice, it would be helpful for everyone to have more women participating. I would take it further to even say, when there are women participating, it would be fantastic if the men present would be mindful of encouraging them and supporting them and how you treat them and how you partner and collaborate with them. I think that's really, really important. It's a conversation that's not being had, and it's something that really, really needs to be addressed. Many times I am in rooms and meetings as the only woman. And even just from just something as simple as the jokes, yeah, that are just not appropriate. It's just like, yeah, everyone contributes, right? And then at the end, it's like, yeah, Tessa, I mean, you know, it's possible that some sugar daddy there was the one, you know, just inappropriate things, which I don't really have to mention in a live panel talk. But do you see what I mean? Like, there's a responsibility not just to include them, but also to deal with them appropriately, to collaborate with them, to extend respect and equal opportunity. That's what
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, colleagues, for your thoughts. And in our last remarks, maybe a minute each, I would want us to give our closing remarks. And in the closing remarks, please ensure that you tell us some of the matches. Rouge, was it Rouge or Phyllis who said we shouldn't do a copy and paste, and which is true. But could there be some of the ways that we've seen and we need to learn from some ecosystems that are thriving that we think that are applicable here? And our colleagues also want to appreciate that when innovation came, people thought it was about tech, about IT, but it's a pleasure that these days we see what is happening in the entertainment industry, in the art and craft. I mean, it's getting real that we see that innovation is applicable to all other sectors. So in your closing remarks, please adhere to 1 minute, but talk about something close to what we need to learn, especially our Ugandan entrepreneurs, what we need to learn to adapt, to adopt, and also be resilient in the next 10 years. Maybe we could start with Emma, and we get to Paul after.
I think what we need to do basically will fall on having the right skill set, and then also the right group of people that can utilize that skill set to help solve the problems that we have. What again, in terms of moving forward as in the Ugandan ecosystem, I think our policy makers should make it an intentional effort to make sure that the environment is quite conducive for new innovators and entrepreneurs to be able to utilize the skills that they have to make impact, as well as also to have a sustainable means of living. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. Yeah, so I think it was Rouge who mentioned, and as I tried to mention earlier, I think really the key for the Ugandan entrepreneur is some form of awareness. In fact, a strong sense of self-awareness. I really think that that's the beginning. Awareness of yourself, awareness of our local market, the environment, and how you can begin to do things differently. So I think once you're aware of yourself, then things like who are the right people, what are the right skills, where's the place that I need to be, what tech do I need to leverage, those come as a consequence of first understanding who you are, your environment, and what you can plug into it differently. So the place that I need to be? What tech do I need to leverage? Those come as a consequence of first understanding who you are, your environment, and what you can plug into it differently. So self-awareness and a willingness to do things differently and to stand alone, because that's not commonplace in our market, and then stay in the long term. We have this joke at TESA that whatever business you decide to do in Uganda, if you just stick in there for 10 years, everybody else would. Like, just choose one thing, stay in that lane, and innovate in that space consistently and in the long term.
Phyllis?
My parting shots will focus on a positive mindset. When the pandemic hit, everyone was so fast to think, oh my God, I don't have this, or I'm not fit for this, or I'm not set for this. Focus on what do I have? What do I have and what can I do with it? I was very inspired by the agriculture industry because everyone else was despairing, and all the people with eggs went like, okay, we might not have a market for the eggs, but we have eggs.
Yeah.
We're going to make mayonnaise. Yeah. Or the entertainment industry, musicians went like, okay, fine, I might not have concerts or weddings to sing at, but I have a voice, so I can sing online. So have a positive mindset. When disaster hits, do not despair. Sit down, pivot, and think of what can I do with what I have.
Sure, Rouge?
So I look at the 10 years focused on our demographic. First of all, our ruling demographic is 3% of our national demographic, that is 58 and over. Over the next 10 years, any issues that you may have will be solved by time. Number two, we are a very young population. 78% of us are under the age of 30. We have time. If you start now and focus on that one thing that Tess just said, focus on one thing. Overnight success is impossible. There is no such thing as here. We are very married to that because we see people and we immediately want to be as successful as they are, but then fail to understand that it took them 10 years. It took me, I'm now on like year 8 of building Raintree Farms. It's because I was focused and I know it can be transformative and mission-oriented the way I actually wanted to do. Stick with it. You have time. It's not a rush to think that, you know, you're 28 and you're starting something and you want to be successful tomorrow. That is the false attitude to actually have about it. Find something that you love and you're willing to stick to for as long as it takes to actually build it. One of the best pieces of advice a friend gave to me when I was frustrated that things weren't going my way was that if you stick to this idea, it will take the time that is required to take. The only way you lose is if you quit before that idea matures. And I fully believe what she said, that if you're willing to stick with it, your competition, everybody else will fall by the wayside because they were not married to their idea. Be married and have conviction about the idea that you do want to execute. And also, it's okay to fail, by the way. It's okay to fail and start over. If you figure out that, you know, there is something that you're passionate and actually want to do, and you constantly fail and start over, eventually that engine will start. It only completely fails if you decide, I am done. And that you will be done. But go through life knowing that I left everything on the field, as opposed to wishing that I know I could have tried something different. Yeah, that's my philosophy for the 10
Emma,
years.
as you conclude, to our entrepreneurs listening in and watching, what do you think are some of the things that they should learn from MobiPay, especially what you should do, what you would do, and what probably you're going to do? What are those things that our entrepreneurs probably should go away with after this panel?
For me, I think that the most important thing I would say to them is, how do you make the so-called competition irrelevant? Okay? Mm-hmm. How do you create a new demand? Mm-hmm. How do you make the customers love the product or the services that you are providing? Mm-hmm. And that is the most important thing, because as we move along, we are going to have a whole lot of innovations, a whole lot of services, and but how will you be able to steal from the bigger group, the customers? So what is that unique thing that you will be able to do to create a new demand for your services. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you so much, Rouge. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Phyllis. I think I have about 2 minutes, so I would want to get 2 questions from our audience, and you can shoot them to anyone on the panel except me. And maybe before we get a question, there's something that I pick from Emma. From even my small experience that I've had, I realized that us Ugandan entrepreneurs really have what you may look at as the skills, as the knowledge. I mean, we have some guys who have developed brilliant innovations, right? Application systems, call it, name it. But the challenge that we've always had was on business development. How do they put that brilliant technology or app or system to the market and they're able to convince the customer that this actually works and you need to pay for this? Questions? I saw Alan.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Gilbert, for this opportunity. I come from iVenture Africa. We're a startup accelerator without walls. That means we take innovation into the communities in which we work. That means refugee settlements, host communities, universities, corporate organizations, etc., etc. One, I've found BDS, Business Development Services, to be a tad expensive for startups. Startups cannot afford business development services. I wonder what Paula is doing in that line of thought. Two, there are things we talk about on panels like this, like runway, pitching, things that are not relatable for the basic startup, for the startup on the ground. We're talking 400,000 graduates, maybe 20,000 are going to try a business, and they're listening in. We're talking about pitching, runway, things that somebody may not relate with real quick. How do we become more relevant to the vast majority of people that we're targeting? That's the young people that Rouge was talking about. And then gender lens investing is a very important aspect of what we do. We're also looking for that 70% quota of women participating in our accelerator programs and such. But women, by nature, and I might get in trouble for this, are more nurturers. That means you're probably not going to find a group of men running a daycare, right? And you probably wouldn't take your kid there. So how do we appropriate this message? We say many things like inclusivity, that quota of 70% women, but how do we make it real? That respect, that mutual respect that you need to give women in the boardroom, that type of thing. I mean, what are the practical steps? Because I found it extremely difficult. My team is all women except for one person who is the photographer and the tech person. Do you understand? The ladies cannot take those photos, or they don't want to.
Are you sure they cannot take them?
Yes. Well, they can, but you see, I have to force, and I find myself overworking myself to get a lady to get into tech or technical things.
Sure. Thank you, Alan. Let me take one more question so that we answer all the questions at once, and then we can end our discussion. Any other question? Okay, so we shall react to those questions, Alan, and then we shall end our panel. Maybe we start with Paula, who has the first question.
Yeah. So I got actually the 3 questions. The last one was about nurturing women to take a position. The second was about cost of BDS. And the first one was, oh, okay, right. You'll do that one? Okay, cool. So I'll start with the last one. What I have found, and again, speaking these gender things, we might get in trouble, so disclaimer. But yes, I find women in general to be nurturers, thereby making them more reliable, thereby making them more committed to staying to do things in the long term, but then at the same time, as Alan said, not coming out at the front to apply themselves or execute and everything. That's a cultural thing. And so if Alan and anybody here listening or watching is asking themselves, practically, how do they do that and how do we do that? I spend a lot of my time in business coaching with women, simply providing validation, almost like validation and a tier of permission. That's it. Because I'm talking to this lady, highly skilled, many of them overskilled, sitting on ideas that will impact, in my mind, because obviously it might be obvious I'm very idealistic, that can impact thousands or at least hundreds of people in their communities over time. But they're simply waiting for someone to tell them, you can do it. That's it. And it can be pushy. It's a combination of, the visuals, like Phyllis was saying, and showing them that it's possible, and actually just get out of the way. If there was a project you had, and one of the ladies could take basic photos with a DSLR, and that guy wasn't there, and they couldn't get you in the phone, I guarantee you, those pictures would be taken. They would step up. But I feel like the thing that we need to do to nurture them is to create the opportunity, give them validation, and I think the sky is the limit. That's just my opinion, and that's how we have done it with our business coaching. When it comes to cost, it's what I said. So we pivoted our model, and we're still pivoting our model to really make BDS as cheap as possible, where, when we're talking about the runway a startup needs to have so that they don't run out of money, or a business model, which has been referenced here in a canvas, or a lead generation and sales funnel, or any of that fancy sounding stuff, we're trying our best to make it as cheap as possible, again, by aggregating those tools, making them as practical as possible, even removing, the big names like acquisition or funnel, which many times are really just explaining like a cycle or a framework or a way of doing things. So that's what we're doing. However, I do want to caution, something that I hear a lot from startups is that thing, affordability, which is very subjective. So should you be expecting a local startup to pay a couple of million shillings for BDS? No, because they need most of that money to build teams and build their products and services and so on. But we still do expect you to pay.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have skin in the game, and there must be some challenge. So offering, like we did as a trial, 250K for 2 business coaching sessions where we go over your model, whatever, that's affordable. That's something I expect you to invest in instead of wasting 2 years making mistakes when we could show you the way maybe from our experience, or at least merge a way with you on how you can run your business more effectively and efficiently.
Phyllis, you had something to say?
In terms of the technical jargon that we've been using, the so-called technical jargon, that's a session that Paula deals with. There's a saying that usually runs around that people throw around casually, but it's very annoying and sometimes painfully true. They say if you want to hide something from an African, hide it in a book. It's very, very unfortunate, but it's very true. So I would encourage businesses to be hungry for knowledge. Yeah, because we were once there. We were once also hearing runway and going like, oh my God, what is that? And you're in a pitching competition and they're using all this language that you're not familiar with. But because we're hungry for knowledge, after the pitching session, you go back and find out what is runway, what is business model canvas, what is all this product market fit. In that when you come back to interface with other entrepreneurs and other business people, you're well versed with the jargon. Because I would assume that these business people who are watching are aiming at getting to the top. No one at the top during their conversation will stop and give you a definition. It's up to you to take the time to be hungry for knowledge and find out what does this language mean, because I'm going to need it in the future.
Well, the other thing too is that if you're getting in any industry, as she said, learn the industry. The industry is not going to back down and and spell it out to you in bright colors, on a piece of paper, because you haven't learned it. The biggest thing that you can do for yourself is to invest in your knowledge capacity of the industry. Read, train, practice, practice, practice. It makes perfect. You need to know more about your industry that you're getting into than the next person. That's how you're going to get successful. You need to dig in and actually invest in knowing what kind of industry am I working in? What are the terminologies, etc. You don't see a doctor going into medical school and failing to learn the terminology and saying, this is too technical. I want to use common words for these things. It's not possible. You need to learn the terminology for that industry and what it means to you, in that ecosystem for you to be able to, one, communicate with your customer base, two, communicate with your suppliers, and all, investors and grant funders. This is terminology they need. It means something, and if you are unable to use that, it's going to be difficult for you to survive in that ecosystem and your business as well.
Let me just add Let me add up to the aspect of the gender inclusion. One of the practical way we can do it is male engagement. Okay. How do we engage our fathers and brothers to learn to understand that what women can do or what men can do, a woman can do, in the sense that it has been constructed that men or boys are good at IT or the STEM subjects, and the girls are good, just like you mentioned, they are good at the nurturing, the social sciences, but that is not what it is. And so one of the best way we can do that is the male engagement. Let help the men to understand the equal value that women or ladies can bring on board. And if we are able to deconstruct that, then it
implemented by Adelphi in partnership with Finding XY and with Seed. And to get us started, I would like to hand over to Nadia Kanata, who's the head of sustainable development at the European Union delegation in the Republic of Uganda, to give us a short introduction and welcoming remarks. Please, Nadia.
Thank you very much, Rainer. I had the honor to participate also this morning, so I think I had already said a lot in terms of why green economy is extremely important for us. But it's true that this morning we were sort of focused more on the role of the private sector. Well, I think I'm extremely happy that this afternoon we take the dialogue together with the banks and the financial institutions, because they have a pivotal role to play, in the sense that all studies demonstrate the difficulty for SMEs to access finance, and when they do it for short-term interventions, and they do it at a high price. So we can imagine that it becomes even more difficult when we speak about promoting green economy in this context. Of course, we could look at the national development banks, but then they would need a certain level of capitalization that allows them to invest in SMEs, which is not the case in many countries. We could look at long-term financing like equity or the stock exchange, but SMEs have extreme difficulties in accessing it. So we are a little bit in a situation where the banks and the financial institutions play an extremely important role in financing the green economy, in allowing the private sector to then operate in this space. On the other side, we also think that while we recognize that they play an extremely important role, we also recognize that there are a number of opportunities at the moment. Historically speaking, it's probably a very good moment for a bank and a financial institution to engage in green financing, because a lot of the donors at the moment are stepping up the commitments. If I look at the European Union, for example, we are really stepping up our commitment to support the green investments. So there will be more opportunities in terms of technical assistance, of blended finance, of capacity building, of working together to make this happen. And on the other side, while we find that, yes, there is an opportunity, also in terms of green recovery, this is something that we were saying a lot this morning in the different speeches, also with the National Planning Authority, that the green economy is an opportunity to change the way we finance development at country level. But we also think that there is a sort of reputational benefit in doing so. the issues of environmental conservation, issues of social responsibility, sustainable economic balance are becoming extremely visible. So we really believe that an institution that engages in this wins a lot in terms of image. So I didn't want to take too much time because it's really just so I'm not the expert, so I would really like to listen to the experts, but I just wanted to throw these few ideas of the fact that in reality, we really think it's an opportunity to go into that space. And then I will pass the floor. Thank you. And you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you very much for this welcome remarks and also for setting the scene very nicely. So you also done my job pretty much. That's excellent. And of course, we're very happy to implement the UGEFA program or project on behalf of the European Union delegation in Uganda. I would like to quickly introduce my panel, which not going to be engaged for a few minutes, since I will first do the introductions and setting the scene. Also talk a little bit more about the topic of what is a green SME. And then we will go into the opportunity mapping, where the panel will then come in. And then everybody who's now joining us is also most welcome to come in to map opportunities jointly with us. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of ideas coming from it. So who are my panelists? First one is Catherine Collin. She's the head of the regional representation, Eastern and Central Africa of the European Investment Bank, the EIB, which is the EU's bank, right? That's the right slogan, Catherine, if I remember it. Or what is the slogan again? It's the EU's bank, right?
Yes, the EU bank. Yeah.
The EU bank, exactly, yeah. And then we also have Anna Nikolaeva Schnieper, a project coordinator for KFW, based in Kampala, I guess. Anna, are you also there?
Yes. Yes. Hello. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Hi. And last but not least, we have John Isabiria. He's the acting head of corporate relations at Equity Bank, one of our partners for UGEFA. John, did you also join us? I can't really see it on the list at the moment. Then Maggie will try to connect him as soon as possible to join us as well. He was also there this morning for a session. So let me first start off with a little bit introductions and a little bit more of setting the scene on what Nadia did. I think one important message I hear over and over again in this space at the moment is for many years, people in climate finance and green finance, they have been talking about unlocking the trillions. Now, thanks to COVID, unfortunately, but it's just the case, these trillions have been unlocked. And now it's a question more about taming these trillions. So how is the money actually going to come into the market and actually create impact in the market? And that's what we are here to look into. And there are lots of opportunities there for financial instruments, for financial actors, for financial institutions to move ahead. To look at this, we first have to get a clearer picture. What is actually green? What creates a green impact? How can we, if we talk about green recovery, for example, as one of the catchphrases, where are we and how do we get there? For this, I would like to ask you to join me on a little Mentimeter. Maggie, if you go to the Menti one. Mentimeter is basically an online surveying opportunity. So if you go to menti.com, or if you have the app installed on your phones or your iPads or your computer, but if you go to menti.com, you can find there an opportunity to put in a code, the 350254113. You can see it displayed here. And with this, you can answer a couple of questions. First one, what type of organization do you represent here today? And also, how related is your work to financing green enterprises of a scale of 1 to 5? And I just would like to ask everyone to quickly do this, also the panelists, so we can get a first picture of who's actually here to see who's represented. So just go to menti.com, it's fairly easy, and then type in this code, 3502413. Then you click the submit button, and then you can add there who you are and first question. And then there's a second question, which will be shown in a second, and then we can answer the second question. Maggie, you're going to push us forward, right? Once people have answered the first question. So if you are on the MOTV studio at the Kampala Innovation Week, there are also several people there. You can also join in if you go to the wireless system and then type in menti.com, or you can do this in the app if you have the app installed by any chance. Not sure if you already used it this morning. And Maggie's going to tell me once we move to the next question, right? She moved to the next question. So now we have a slider. How related is your work to financing green enterprises of a scale of 1 to 5? So 1 would be you strongly disagree, and with 5 you say you strongly agree. And then once you have done that, you can press the submit button, and then we're going to see it here as well. Maybe just display the results. Okay, so we go back in a second. Can you go back one step so I can, or not? Well, yeah. So here we see what type of organization do we present. So we have enterprises here, development and finance institutions, intermediate incubators, and others. And I guess several people, at least from the ones in the MOTV studio, didn't answer the question. So that's something to improve on. And then we go to the next step. How involved are you in green finance? There we can see several people strongly agree. Some people are in the middle, and the average at the moment is 3.54, 4.2. Okay, so lots of people already very much involved working on financing green enterprises. Okay, so in this case, we'll have a fairly easy job, and maybe whoever wants to comment, you can put questions into the chat, as you have seen, into the Q&A, so they can be answered. So we see both there. If something comes up, Maggie will be kind to intervene. So wherever want to contribute something, please do so. Let me go into introducing quickly what is the Uganda Green Enterprise Finance Accelerator. I'll make that shortly very brief, because I think it has been introduced earlier in the earlier sessions. It basically has been installed to support green enterprises in Uganda. As Adelphi, we have been working on this topic since 8 years in the Ugandan context, and since more than 15 years internationally, but it has gained a lot of traction recently. And what we want to do, we want to combine financial and non-financial support in order to help these enterprises flourish. So there is part of it a catalyzer program, which is based on an accelerator program, which is mainly the non-financial support, where these businesses receive support to develop their business further. And at the moment, you can apply for it if you have a business. The window has been opened, especially for Kampala Innovation Week, for the first batch once more. And then we have the loan facilitation, and that's the main part we want to talk about, because over the years working with enterprises, we have discovered more and more that a lot of these enterprises lack financing, and we're talking about a range of between 10 and 100,000 US dollars. So smaller scale financing, they can't have access to it, and that's the main target group of this UGEFA, to have loan facilitation with commercial banks in Uganda to set this up. You can go to the next slide, please. What we want to do there is to reduce the risks of financing change. So there is a huge opportunity there, which we're going to talk more about, and Nadia already mentioned it earlier. So what we do there as well on the financial support is we establish a tailored loan mechanism and loan facilitation mechanisms. As you all know, there's always a lot of talk about impact investment. One of the issues with impact investment, they usually target 1 or 2 in 100 enterprises, which actually get financing. So what we're targeting here is all the other enterprises, or at least a significant part of those, who have investments which can be financed by a loan, but they are considered too risky, they're unfamiliar, there might be the loan cost might be too high. So that's what we try to tackle here with the green, with the financial facilitation mechanism. We also provide technical assistance to banks, which has been very popular already in the Ugandan context. And also there is interactive green climate finance trainings and dialogue fora, and one of them we add at the moment, so this is part of the first years of work. The project will run until the end of 2023. So what does it do? As a short overview, we are aiming, we will in total support, can you go to the next slide, Maggie, please? And overall, we will support 400 enterprises with facilitating a total of, and 100 of those will receive loans. We will have about more than $6 million of debt financing, that's the objective, and up to 800 jobs being created in the green sectors. I just saw the figures of the latest impact study of the activities we do in this regard in other countries, and I'm quite optimistic that the number of jobs might be even larger than what is mentioned here with the overall volume which we have here. I think one of the first questions which we have, what is a green SME? That's what we always hear from the financial institutions. So financial institutions, of course, they're very familiar with financing houses, with financing cars, with financing equipment for the households, but they're not so familiar with green enterprises. And so we put here several example sectors out there, which we're also targeting with the UGEFA program. You might see that we don't target agriculture. The main reason for this is that the European Union already has programs out there for agriculture, but for example, food processing is being targeted, but not pure agricultural activities. What are the sectors we're targeting at is waste management, it's sustainable tourism, it's green manufacturing, it's sustainable transport, and clean energy. So these are all sectors which can be regarded as green, and there are green activities happening there. And so all these sectors are eligible to be targeted at. I want to talk into a little bit more depth about three sectors: sustainable tourism, green manufacturing, and clean energy. Of course, there's also waste management and sustainable transport, and actually a significant part of the enterprises we work with are from the waste sector as well. So this is waste collection services. It's building materials made out of waste, but it's also plastic waste upcycling. It's fertilizer. So these are all enterprises which might be active in the waste management sector. And of course, there's sustainable transport, all kinds of sustainable transport, like Buddha Buddha, for example, which run on more energy efficient technologies or even green technologies being used for transport to be moved forward. But let's look at the three sectors in depth in a second. Sustainable tourism. So tourism is set to become a larger industry in the Ugandan context. So you can see here the ambitious goals of the UGGDS, which is to increase the value of tourism activities from about $500 million to $1 billion by 2030, and also to create an additional 360,000 green jobs or jobs in the tourism sector, lots of them green, hopefully, to work on the tourism. What kind of activities can be seen there? So that's the investment opportunities, if we talk about the financial institutions. It can be tours and tour operators, like bicycle tours, air balloon travel, marine activities, Lake Victoria, river rafting on the Nile River. There's, of course, the question of agrotourism. It involves tourism with crops, such as coffee and cacao. And also to have a combination of income from the crops and supplement this by touristic income. It can be the manufacturing of handicrafts and the selling of handicrafts in tourism-related activities and to a target group of tourists. And of course, it can be equal accommodation with all kind of lodging to be foreseen. And this can be the construction, but also the operation of such lodging elements. Unfortunately, tourism at the moment, there's hopefully some domestic tourism happening in Uganda. International tourism is probably very limited to non-existent, but we are hopeful that this will change again. And when I read through all these different elements here, I would be already keen to travel again after all of us have been have been necessitated to stay at home now for such extended period of time. And so this is all kind of potential investment projects. The next sector I want to talk about is the clean energy sector. The per capita connection in Uganda is still one of the lowest in the world, but of course this also leads to a massive growth in the clean energy sector, which can be seen here, of up to 10 to 12% annually. There is a Uganda Green Growth Development Strategy, the UGGDS, that we talked about earlier already, and they have very ambitious goals to have renewable energy for domestic use for at least 56% of the households, the creation of 55,000 service jobs, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions because of the use of renewable energies in the provision here of clean energy. And these are all kinds of sectors and subsectors in this case, where there is potential for investments. Because if you think about the energy sector, one thing energy sector has in common everywhere, it always needs investments, and investments needs to be financed. And of course, that's a fantastic business opportunity also for financial institutions to move ahead. So what could be the role here of the clean energy SMEs? The next first one is the biogas. So it's foreseen that there are about 10,000 biodigesters at the moment there are about 10,000 biodigesters, but many, many more to come. And there's several biodigester construction companies and operation companies, especially construction companies out there. Some of those we have also supported in the past. There is, of course, the energy source of LPG, to have a market there on packaging LPGs and distributing those and bringing it to the customers, and also having innovative pay-as-you-go schemes to use them. So that's a huge market for SMEs. Again, investments needed there for working capital, but also for investments. There's biomass and briquettes, and that's a connection sometimes also to the waste sector. There is SMEs producing the production of those in the packaging, but also in the distribution. Of course, there's the solar, off-grid solar services, which are a market in terms of the installation, the maintenance, and also the operation of those. Again, investments being needed there on several areas. And last but not least, the clean cook stoves. All of these sectors provide opportunities for business, successful business, for cash flows. And if there are cash flows, there's also opportunity for financial institutions to finance those. Last but not least, I want to move to the green manufacturing sector. Here, there's also a push in Uganda towards a green industrialization until 2040. So they want to create, or the idea is to have about $600 million US dollars of GDP being added, additional reduction of greenhouse gas reductions and greenhouse gas emissions, and also the creation of several tens of thousands of jobs. What are typical subsectors here, which the SMEs can come from? It can be agro-processing. Just talked about it. Agricultural sector is not included in UGEFA, but the agro-processing provides plenty of opportunities, and also the distribution and sales of these agro-processed goods. There is the textiles and clothing sectors, with SMEs being involved in the value addition there in textiles and clothing. There is the topic of, or the area of cosmetics, with cosmetic products, with soaps, with foam products, and we have seen a lot of those in the last years also in the green sector, and there's also a lot of interest and demand for those. There is the construction sector, where SMEs already play an important role, and with now moving towards more greener, more energy efficient housing, there is more opportunity also to finance there. And last but not least, it's the growing market of household goods. And there is also the question, what kind of goods are being used? What kind of efficiency standards do they fulfill? And also opportunities for SMEs to maintain those, to produce those, to distribute those are out there, which also needs financing again. As last couple of slides, I would like to go to the incentives for financing green SMEs. I think Nadia already mentioned several of those. One, I think it's one which is often overlooked, but I think it's an interesting one for the financial institutions. It can go beyond CSR and actually integrate corporate social responsibility in the core business of a financial institution. At the moment, you're still in a market where there's a first mover advantage, so you can actually be number one in this market, or at least in the top 2, 3. There is a lot of positive media attention attached to this, and we see this recently increasing. There's a lot of interest in this regard. There's, of course, the support for the environmental impacts. So again, having a green also at the center and at the core activities of the financial institution. And you can build a reputation and improve your reputation in the local market. And last but not least, that private customers might more and more find it interesting to bank with such an institution who has or which has a green outlook. Maybe the even more important part is the second slide, and this is the additional business. So this is a access and also learning experience to work with a whole growing pipeline of SMEs which are working in these markets and gaining experience in these green markets, having new ideas how to design and create financing products, especially targeted to these green markets. There's, of course, the access to funding and new sources of money. And I'm sure EIB and KFW will also talk about this. But I think we haven't even seen the start of this, what's happening there, with the huge commitments being done on the international level, but also nationally in Uganda towards green financing. There's, of course, the regular networking to get in touch with like-minded people on green finance to actually see these new opportunities. Banks are looking to grow and they want to grow, and there's a lot of liquidity in the market. The question is how to put this liquidity to good use and maybe also have more competitive products. There's, of course, the link to capacity building, since national but also international donors are interested in this topic. There's an interest to also support bank staff to become more familiar with green and climate finance at the moment. There's the topic of risk reduction through funding facilitation mechanisms. So there can be a risk reduction mechanism built into these financial programs and projects. And last but not least, tailored technical assistance to you as a bank, but also to your clients, coming in at low cost or sometimes for free, because there's an interest in the earlier slide, the green impacts. So basically, if you look at it from a financial perspective, there is an interest of financing these kind of activities, and the ones who finance it, they want to get back greenhouse gas emission reductions, they want to get back a greener economy, they want to get back green job creation. That's what you pay them back for. So they don't want money in the first place. They want, if they give a credit line, of course, they want to have their credit line reimbursed. But the cheaper money or sometimes free money comes in because there's additional services provided by the banks. With this, I think I've said enough of the scene. I would like now to ask 3 of my panelists to come in and give us a little bit of their perspective on it. Also to, and we will already note this down, to basically now get a 5-minute input remark. And then later on, we want to go into the direction, what are incentives and opportunities, what are available resources and expertise, and what are other ecosystem insights. And first, I would like my panel to comment on it, Catherine, Anna, and John. And then I would like to have also the audience contributing to it and also have an interesting discussion about these opportunities which come up there. So thanks for listening to me, first of all. And I would like ask John to come in. John, you're there. I can see you on the screen. So maybe if you unmute yourself, I'd very much like you to give us a quick introduction. Why is this an interesting topic for you? And also, what kind of opportunities do you see there when you look at green finance? John? Now you're unmuted and I can't hear you yet. John, can you hear us? Or can we hear you?
Thank you.
Can you speak again? Connection wasn't so great at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Now, the opportunities and finance, first of all, this is the new ground I have to admit.
John, I'm not really sure if the connection is holding.
No, hold no. All right.
John, you can hear us? Like, I have difficulties understanding you. Maggie, is it better for you or not?
No, unfortunately not. Perhaps we can come back to John.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe you can send John the number to call in. Maybe that's better from the quality. Okay, so maybe let's go to the second panelist. Catherine, can I ask you to come in here? Since John, we will try to reconnect John on a better connection to the conversation.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I understand that some are participating virtually, others are in presence somewhere in Kampala. So just let me first thank you for inviting EIB and for allowing me to join from Nairobi, where I am based. And I very much regret that I couldn't come to Kampala. Actually, Kampala was my last trip outside Kenya back in March for the quite successful business forum that was organized by our colleagues from the delegation. So nice to join you again today. I think as far as EIB is concerned, I mean, the topic is, of course, mostly relevant. You may be aware that a couple of days ago, the EIB Board of Directors has approved in its first reading, which was a major achievement in itself, quite an ambitious climate bank roadmap that clearly positioned the bank as not only the EU bank, but also the climate bank. And this roadmap, I mean, we'll see a sharp increase in the level of financing that we to support climate and environmental sustainability that should exceed 50% of our overall lending activity by 2025. That hopefully will trigger over €1 trillion of investments, and also the bank is now committed to be fully aligned to the Paris Agreement in terms of its principle and goals by the end of this year, which of course is very ambitious as well and represents a couple of challenges. But I mean, that clearly sets the tone to the fact that EIB is fully committed to supporting green economy, green transition, and green recovery, because now we also have to talk about green recovery after the pandemic that has ravaged the world over this year. And sub-Saharan Africa in general, I mean, I found this very interesting, and you may have spoken about that earlier today, so I'm sorry if I repeat it, but I just could not attend the whole event. I think Uganda, like many sub-Saharan African countries, is very highly exposed to climate change risk, and so we need to embark on this. So I think there's no opposition to this principle. And I had a look, and there is the so-called Notre Dame Index that kind of measures climate change vulnerability versus readiness to mitigate and adapt to the impact of climate change. And I think that the ranking of Uganda, which comes 12th out of 181 countries in terms of vulnerability, and 36 out of 181, sorry, in terms of readiness to tackle the issue, in itself says that there is a very good and a very strong case for Uganda. And I think it's very nice to see, and thanks for your presentation, Heiner, because it was very interesting to see the objective and the scope of what you are trying to achieve with this Green Enterprise Finance Accelerator. So now looking at a bit more the question, as to, you know, why should banks be interested and be looking into that? I think we all know that SME, especially in these countries, but overall, even in Europe, SME and micro enterprise are the backbone of the economy. They are the drivers. They need finance to advance, and banks are their main sources of finance. And I think bank as an integral part of the society need to take a very prominent role in supporting the green transition and the green economy. So, and we observe that there is indeed an interest in doing so. So that's something that has started a couple of years ago, but will hopefully intensify now. So there are various ways in which we can help, but I think what is key, and that's hopefully where you are helping in your work and where the EU is helping a lot, is trying to have an enabling environment that is favorable and that will allow this to be successful. We need to have that, and that's where the dialogue with the public, between the public and the private, is very important to set this environment. We need to be innovative and creative in the type of instruments that we use, and I think we have shown over the last couple of years on the EIB side, but as well other development finance institutions and the EU, that there is a lot of innovation in the way we tackle this issue in terms of instrument that we deploy. And I think the increasing importance of blending, where the EU grants from the European Union will be blended with some with loans to kind of leverage private sector, and that will be done in different ways, replicating past experience but creating as well a new one, is a very good argument, and we need to use this opportunity, as Nadia was saying, that this is actually an important time in the kind of the planning of the next couple of years in terms of what the EU will be doing. As banks and as DFIs, I think what we all need is bankable projects. A bank is a bank, it remains a bank, and it needs to see the money flowing back. So the project needs to be bankable, and that's why an accelerator like yours is extremely important. I mean, what we have observed in our own experience, we have deployed since 2014 a very important technical assistance program in the region covering Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And this technical assistance program has been actually instrumental in helping us deploy line of credit. It was not specifically focusing on climate change, it was more general lines of credit. But if we take the example of Uganda, I think, you know, this program has enabled to train over 2,500 bankers, banking professionals, among others, because the banks also need to learn how to do it. And so you need to target the banks, of course, to help them assess the risk that is related to these type of projects. So you would do it in the case of climate action, but also you need, of course, to help the business owners. And that's, I believe, what you are doing as well. In our program, we've done it with more than 7,000 business owners in Uganda only, who have received training on skills in various areas. So, I mean, this program has been key, and I think it will remain so. We will always need to have this soft element, if I may call it as well, that is critical to enable DFIs and then banks to make the finance available to those enterprises who need it. So I think the element, of course, that is also very important is awareness raising, creating the awareness that this is a must, actually, in the current conditions. And what we can do as DFI, I think, to promote, I mean, there are various mechanisms, and then, of course, the idea of mixing loans and grants is one. I mean, we can kind of offer concessional loans that will be long in the terms of the tenor, because one thing that is always important to remember is that a loan, the price or a loan or the interest of a loan is not only in the interest rates, that means how much the loan costs, but there is a tangible benefit in the duration of the loan. And we know that in these regions, I mean, long-term lending is sometimes difficult to access, and that is a very important element that we can offer. I mean, we can do green lines of credit. We haven't done it in Uganda yet. We were discussing this before the outbreak of the COVID crisis. So that has kind of refocused a bit the attention for a couple of months, but we hope that we can restart this discussion with commercial banks in Uganda, and we believe that there is great potential. And somehow, without our positioning as the climate bank, this is probably be one of the only avenues that we will be able to follow. As I said, you know, encourage more technical assistance program that can help. And then also, yeah, promoting innovation in terms of the instruments that can be deployed. And very important is to put in place an appropriate monitoring and evaluation mechanism, because it's all good to say we're going to be lending so much, but we need to make sure that after that, this money is going where we wanted it to go, and it generates the outcome and the impacts that we are hoping. So well, I think I'll stop here. I hope it answered the question. I have to say your presentation was extremely comprehensive. So not easy to add much to that, because you had said a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine. I think that was extremely useful. And I also have a couple of follow-up questions, which I will ask after I talk to the other couple of panelists. Since there are some very important elements in here, especially about the scale of things which we are entering now at this stage. And it's not testing anymore. Now it's the question that it has to go to a large scale. And that's a very different game all of a sudden than from having nice small projects at times and credit lines. Anna, can I ask you to come in as representatives from KFW to give us your take on this?
Yes, hello. I hope everyone can hear me.
Very well.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this round. It's my pleasure to discuss this very important topic in Uganda and in Africa worldwide. Just to begin with, I think we're talking here of a global trend that needs to find local solutions, because it's basically from the local level that the climate-related risks are amounting and compounding and then affecting from Karamucha due to increased droughts to changing climate somewhere in the polar areas of Russia, where the methane is now being released on a much larger scale. So we're talking about a global trend, and we're trying to see what can be done in Uganda and how could the interest of the commercial banks participate in the green finance programs and to look into the strategic increase and highlight the funding available for green at the moment is really unprecedented. This is probably a historic moment when there is so much funding being made available. I think one of the IFC estimates was talking about $1 trillion 2030. Don't quote me because
Anna, I think like the connection is breaking up at the moment. Okay. Over the show. Maggie, can you still hear her or not?
Unfortunately not.
Okay, unfortunately. Yeah. Anna, maybe you switch off the video. Might be a good idea to maybe save some bandwidth.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do the same.
Right, I hope it will work. So yes, I hope you heard I was talking about more the global picture and the importance of the green finance that is accumulating with every day. Now, the W does in this space, I think that is quite a focal area of our engagement and
Okay. I can't hear Anna anymore. I don't know, Catherine, is it any different for you?
2020, yes, there is. Can you hear me?
I can't hear anything. It's all breaking and.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Rainer, do recommend what to do? How should we proceed? Shall I just continue, or is it?
I think the connection is pretty bad. Maybe Maggie, can you send a telephone number to Anna where she can call in? I think. Anna,
Yes,
Maggie will send you a telephone number, and then maybe we reconnect. And then, since John also tried to reconnect and dropped off again, I think we're having some unfortunately some connection problems here. I hope the colleagues in Kampala can hear us well. Let me quickly move back to Catherine to ask a couple of questions, which I wanted to ask, if that's okay. And maybe Maggie, can you send Anna the phone number? That would be great.
Hope I'm not going to suffer that I'm the only one who's properly connected.
Yeah, same here. But this morning was working quite well. So yeah, this morning was working well. So I think Anna can hear us. She didn't say she can't hear us. So I think it's more the speaking part which seems to be an issue. Catherine, let me ask you a couple of questions, which we are supporting also the EIB in Europe on the private finance for energy efficiency as expert support facility. And one thing we see there, and I wonder if that's a similar experience you are having now in Eastern and Central Africa, since we're now moving to a different scale, and the overall volumes of finance which are going into the green energy efficiency climate direction are getting larger, that these problems and with pipeline development are also accelerating, because if you have to find 10, 15 enterprises to give a loan to, it's not a problem. If you all of a sudden have to find 150 or 1,500, it's very different. Is that something you're also experiencing here in the African context?
I'm not sure we can already state that, but I think what I could say and is that I think we've been trying for a couple of years already to kind of push for, especially on the lines of credit, to push for the green. The banks were maybe a bit reluctant at the beginning because they prefer, and that's on complete natural, I have to say, in terms of lines of credit, they prefer to have the latitude to kind of deploy the money according to their the business that is generated, and dedicated or thematic lines of credits come with a couple of strings attached to them. So I think that's something on which, but I think as the awareness raises, I hope it will change. Now, in terms of scalability, I mean, what we see in this region, I mean, is that I think, East African region and a lot of countries in Africa, they are at a bit of a competitive edge, at least in terms of availability of renewable energy, which is, of course, a main driver. And if we look at the portfolio here in the region, I mean, renewable energy is actually dominant in our portfolio. And that means, be it, large generation capacity, but also off-grid mobile home solar systems, small hydro, small solar. So I think I'm not sure there is a problem of pipeline. They may actually be, the competition is increasing in terms of getting the nice project, and I don't know, maybe the colleagues from KIW can confirm that. But of course, in terms of scalability, yes, we need to scale, and that's going to be a bit of a challenge, because we need to scale with bankable projects, and I think that's going to be the critical point. There are lots of projects. but they're not all bankable. And for us, unfortunately, but that's what makes it sustainable as well. I think it's not unfortunate, but sustainability can only be ensured through bankability, and that's where we need to focus our attention. I hope it answers your question.
Yeah, it does very much. Thank you, Catherine. I think John is now also back from Equity Bank. John, can we give it another try that you come in with your contribution to the topic of green finance? And maybe you can already elaborate on the question of bankability and pipeline, maybe within the experiences of Equity Bank.
All right, you can hear me?
Yes, very well.
All right, thanks. I had a problem, but we have sorted it out.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, thank you. You asked the question before I went off. I know I have missed a ton of things, but
Catherine gave the contribution, and Anna also had some connection problems, but we hope to get her back as well in a minute. So if you could just could elaborate a little bit on your perspective as Equity Bank, especially in regarding to what brings you towards the topic of green finance. Where do you see the opportunities there, and maybe also where do you see the challenges, especially when it comes, for example, to pipeline development and bankable projects?
All right. Thank you very much. Now, to be brief and to be on point, it is a new venture. We like to participate in something that is changing the economy and what the youths are doing at the moment. So we think that we are aligned to participate in it because of the opportunities. We can grow the SMEs, the base, the numbers. You alluded to the numbers. Of course, obviously, the numbers, we're going to have the numbers. They're going to grow. But most importantly is that we are a digital bank, and most of the new clients that are coming on board, the young people that are doing these innovations are very young, and they are digitally acute. So we think that if we partner with you, one, we are getting the clients. Two, we are putting them on the platform where everything is done online. Now, the young people that are doing these businesses don't like the normal things of doing the books and everything. Because we are digitizing that process, we feel that we can relate to them and we can grow the bank with them and change their livelihoods. The only challenge we have is that most of these businesses are startups. Like the gentleman who asked me a question when I was at the symposium, was saying, okay, less than a year, can you fund me? The challenge is what will happen after a year. What if he has started the business and within 2 to 3 months he is not interested in the business? So that is the major challenge that we are having with them. But as a bank, we feel that the bottlenecks, we have done it with the bottlenecks where we say we can fund an ecosystem. If you're dealing in biogas, you're processing it, you're refining it, and then you're selling it. So from the point of treatment and to the off-takers, we can fund that process. Leave alone all the days where we say biogas we couldn't touch. No, nowadays we can touch it. If you're dealing in solar, all right? We have people who are dealing in solar and they sell it to schools, and then they charge them on a monthly basis where they pay as if they're paying an electricity bill. So we can fund that whole process. The bureaucracy is not there. The challenge we're having is that these startups, will they be there in the long run? If you have started for 6 months, how sure are we that it's going to be there for the next 3 years? So we as a bank, we feel the opportunity is there to be taken. We can deal with it. We just need to be sure that the people we are dealing with are going to be there in the long run.
Wow, that sounds very encouraging, John, I have to say. And maybe that's also another example where some banks in the north can also learn from banks in the south in terms of the approach and make it, you're very keen on making it very simple, as you say, right, for this whole green financing process.
Yeah, you know, we have to change the way we are doing business, okay? The youth were asking me questions, okay, fine, we fear coming to the banks, but we have to mirror the customer. We have to be as simple as possible. If at all we agree and we say, okay, fine, we are going to fund you, the question should be, how easy is it for you to access the funds? I don't have to ask for your DNA to access the money. So we have to make it as accessible, as simple as possible to the person, and digitally possible. Because if you can just go on your phone and access the money, I think we can have an impact on these enterprises, because people don't like paperwork. They don't like coming to the bank and filling in all that. But if we can digitize that process, then they can grow. Yes.
Yeah, please. Thank you, John, for this. And I just would hand over to Anna, who is now also back, and hopefully the connection is also going to work nicely and improve as much as the one of John did. Maybe just handing it over to you to give us the point of view from KFW. And also maybe just as a first question also to you, Anna, what's your experiences with these more digital solutions, also for green loans and green finance? We have used a couple of digital systems now where we support the banks, and they have been working very nicely. For example, in Armenia, where there was also quite a bit of scalability in this, was making it very simple. But of course, there's the question of accountability of the development banks, which they have. So please, Anna. Anna, I think you're there, but you're muted. Anna?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me now?
Much better. Yeah, excellent. Please.
Yes? All right. Okay. Quite an adventure here with the technology, but I'm glad that I'm back in the round. Sorry, so managing all that, I wasn't really able to follow on the discussion, unfortunately, but I think I left off at some point talking about the KIW engagement in the green space in Africa.
Please continue
on the one hand, Eco-Business Fund for Africa, that was launched really beginning of the 2020, right before the pandemic broke out. And specifically in Uganda, we are funding, the German government through KFW is funding the biodiversity fund housed at the East African Development Bank. Well, it being a biodiversity fund, it's, I would say, sort of very close to the topics of green economy and green finance. Distinct differences, I think, are certainly also there, but in terms of some of the business types and business activities that can be financed, there is certainly some overlap as well. And going back to the question that you posed at the very beginning about the incentives for the banks from our perspective to engage in the space of green finance, I think we give it some thought, and really what it comes down to, what it boils down to, is returns and profits for the banks. It needs to stay in that space and be profitable and be interesting. And I think that for the banks specifically at the moment, considering the level of financing and different instruments available and funds being set up, the opportunity is, and the moment to leverage that concessional finance is really now, and not only leverage that, but also benefit from the technical assistance that often is part and parcel of any such engagement, UGIFA being one of them as an example. And certainly when we look at it, we think oftentimes that it's not only the TA to the end takers, but it's also the TA, a very essential TA that Catherine has mentioned, to the banks themselves and banking sector specialists to understand this new, or maybe rather new, or to understand the existing portfolios in new terms and look for those monitoring and green tags in the existing portfolio. I think that there is a lot to discover also in Uganda in that sense and across Africa. And certainly with the amount of financing available, it is somewhere to strategically position a bank and to find, to build the knowledge in that sense. I think what also could be seen as an incentive is certainly this kind of first mover mentality for some players could potentially pay off in the developing that much knowledge that would help essentially then the development finance institutions, commercial banks, maybe even regulate the bank, central banks to come up with new mechanisms of facilitating this kind of finance. Talking about innovative risk reduction mechanisms, guarantees that are linked to green financing. So I think there are a number of really incentives that I'm sure you have already been talking about today, and when I was out of the room, so to say, that are right there, and I think we recognize them as a community, and I think it just needs to go deeper and needs to really be taken up and worked with. Certainly when banks do work in this, I think agriculture in Uganda has been considered quite a risky investment. A lot of the greening is taking place in agriculture. A lot of the biodiversity financing does encompass agriculture, aquaculture, other sectors, certainly tourism and perhaps renewable energy are somehow specific and a little bit different. But what I would like to say is that building that portfolio and looking at the existing portfolio, trying to see where the green tags are, is something that really will, in my view, bring benefits to the commercial banking space. Thank you. And if you have any further questions, I'm so happy that I'm back in the round and everyone can hear me. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. It was much better, the connection now from both John and from you. And maybe one question, and I would like to open this floor also up to the other participants who are there and the attendees, and they're from the names I know there are several other financial institutions from Kampala present. So if you want to just put it in the chat, and then we can open the channel for you, so you can also contribute. And maybe John, one question for you, because both Catherine and Anna just talked about the topic of the technical assistance to banks. And I know from our conversations, we haven't gone into too much depth into that. So where do you see from your side needs in this regard of technical assistance or coming from development finance institutions or from other service providers?
I think it has to come in at the credit part, because we need to understand the area we are playing in and the area we are funding. Because some of these products, when the way we structure the facilities for some of the green financing has to be different. So we need an understanding, a deep understanding of what we are funding. So information is key. So I think we have to partner with the developers. They have to come on the ground. We must have symposiums. They take us through on how they see how it goes, in that when we're coming up with these products, we have a better understanding. And when we're appraising the files that you send us, we have a better understanding. Though the technical assistance, I think, comes on the two sides at Delphi. I think even we need to partner with an organization that checks the quality. Because let me give you an example. If an entity is dealing in solar and it is selling a product, and that product, it is genuine, all right, but it's not installed in the proper way, that SME is losing business. They will lose that customer the moment they sell that item. So I think as a bank, finance, much as we are funding these SMEs to acquire these items, we need to make sure that, yes, who is installing that after-sales service, in that we are helping this SME not to lose the market. Otherwise, if we just stop at funding, then the person will start defaulting, and then we may think we are doing something wrong, yet we are missing a stage. So we need to cover all bases. Technical assistance to the bank staff to come and say, okay, this is the product, understand it, these are the things, we take them through all the classes. But again, even at the SME, when you sell this product, who is checking on it and who is installing it to make sure the customer is getting the best of what they bought for? So I'm looking at it as a double-edged sword.
Thank you, John. Catherine, is that what the TA, which you talked about earlier, the training for the bankers in East Africa, has also covered, or is that going beyond what your typical TA would cover? TA meaning technical assistance. Sorry.
Yeah.
I know, but I just share with everybody some lingo sometimes we use. Please, Catherine.
I think somehow, if I understand John well, I mean, I think he may be going a step further. Because if I understand well what he says, okay, we all agree we need to have training, technical assistance, capacity building, and skills development within the banks to identify those
I say green projects, then one needs to provide capacity to the final beneficiary, to the micro and SMEs, also, to prepare to make their case because they need to present their project. But if I understand well, John is talking even about, TA to make sure that the actual projects are using the right technology, so it's a technical, it's more of a technical dimension linked to the green element on the final beneficiary side, if I understand John well. I don't think we went as far as that in our technical assistance program because it was more of a general one. But I think somehow I can see that it's a very relevant point, and I think that links a bit with what I mentioned earlier about the need for monitoring and ensuring that the actual outcome will be what we want to have. But so far, we didn't do this in this region, and I'm not sure whether we had such a program in any other region, but I think that's a very interesting avenue to follow.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Catherine. And maybe if I can also bring in Nadia from the EU delegation in Uganda. I'm wondering, do you see potential there, Nadia, for this connection of this technical assistance, what John just mentioned, with the financial support? A little bit of the background, we have been working a lot on switch projects in Africa, but especially in Asia, and they are very technically focused. So they support enterprises basically on the technical side, exactly what John just mentioned, but they don't have this financial connection. There's a certain disconnect between these two streams of support, which is being given to enterprises. And I'm wondering if, I think like UGEFA is doing something in this direction, but not as far as John was describing it. I'm wondering, is there any thinking within the EU Development Corporation in this direction? And I would like also ask the same question to Anna, if maybe that's also what how KFW is approaching that. Nadia?
Yes, here I am. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Okay. I have experience, to be honest, of having done that when I was in Nigeria. We had it was very focused on a specific sector. I would have the feeling that, it would be easier to bring different tools, talk to each other when it's very targeted. So the only example that really comes to my mind is what we did on renewable energies in Nigeria, where we had a program that was specifically working on supporting the quality and the technical aspects of all the products that are needed around renewable energy, while we were able to bring other partners on board, financial institutions, to open credit lines dedicated to renewable energy. And we have really been able to bring the two things together. So it's not impossible at all. I find a little bit difficult, but not impossible. And I would see it working as a starting point when we tailor-made. When we say, okay, in this sector, let's try to bring different approaches together, because the quality of installing the panels requires certain skills, require working also on services, but also having those that are more benefiting from the financial institutions to talk to those that then install, for example, those panels and the way they do it. So I agree that it's important, because that's a question of viability of then the business in general that is funded. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. So my opinion would be to start by really focusing on something very specific. Green economy is very wide. So I would take one of the subsectors specifically, and then there we can have an impact.
Okay. Thank you, Nadia. Anna, what about KFW? Do you have already experiences with the kind of support John was describing?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Excellent. So I could also speak from the specific experience we had in Uganda, more on the biodiversity financing kind of experiences. And I think that a lot of businesses approached and said, show us how to create the positive impact. So there is a dedication of a business to, let's say, be in tourism sector or being more devoted to focusing on organic agriculture, but then connecting the dots and relating it to the biodiversity impact, or let's say more positive, more neutral climate impact. I think there is probably some knowledge gaps there. And one of the recommendations that some of the TA team have brought out is for the programs to consider elements of organizational development. The theory being that going through and looking more and providing support in the soft areas of operations, marketing systems, management, organizational systems, etc., one would eventually touch upon very many topics that have relevance for this business to become sustainable as a business and continue operating in that. So maybe my suggestion is to think possibly of such OD elements in the TA to the end takers of loans as something that could trigger this better understanding of and support to the core business. Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Hello. I was just maybe I was just disconnected. Sorry, Anna. So I didn't hear the last sentence of you. But it was just me, I think. So everybody else heard it. Okay. So we also got this in Germany. So the internet breaks down. I have a question. I would like to call in. Sorry. I would like to call in Sarah Fortunate from UDB, who wanted to contribute here. Sarah, can you unmute yourself? And you can also and we can hear you.
Yes, hello, Reina and colleagues. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Not sure though, can you hear me well?
Very well.
Awesome. To start with, maybe to say UDB, why we are interested to be key players in this green space is one, because of our being a public policy financial institution bank and mandated to support government to achieve its national objectives through sustainable financial interventions. That is one of the key areas because, yes, as a country, we have committed through various policies and strategies, the national determined contributions, and of course now we are implementing the third national development plan and all the green growth strategy and so many other plans and strategies that the country has developed. So that is one of our key incentive to be active players in this realm. However, we have also, in a way, burned our fingers from our experience financing, say, the agriculture sector. I think Caroline or Nadia had just briefly mentioned that usually this sector is looked at as a very risky sector. And true, for instance, initially, previously for projects that we have funded is, for instance, in the area we call the cattle corridor. These are areas that usually face a lot of drought in the country. We have had a bit of challenges previously where when the drought happens, and because during our appraisal processes, we had not emphasized issues to do with resiliency, water sources. So you find that some of these projects, particularly in the livestock sector, they were not able to pay back their obligation because there was no source of water, meaning that the cows would not produce their milk, and hence they would not be able to have an income to pay back their obligations. So now all projects, specifically in the agriculture sector, we look at these challenges. We look at these climate challenges. We look at these resilience technologies and practices and ensure that they are part and parcel of the conditions of the covenants that we, for us to be able to finance these investments. So that also is an incentive for us. However, also going on a little further, we noticed that for those that have been able to implement these green technologies, Of course, they have been able to improve their profitability because of their reduced operational cost, and they have been able to be better clients of ours than those that have not implemented the green technologies. So as a bank right now, we're in the process of greening the bank, but also in the process of saying, okay, fine, yes, at a country level, we are speaking about implementing all these policies that I've just alluded to, conditional towards access to international financing, because the government financing, let's say in the current NDC, we talk about 30%, that the national coffers can be able to put in, but of course that is less. So for what is channeled through UDB, we are looking for ways in which we can leverage it to be able to leverage this money to attract both private and public investors, so that they can be able to invest more into these green projects and businesses. And based on that, we are also looking into developing what we are calling a green financing vehicle, which we hope will be able to play as well as the role of the national financing vehicle to be able to help the country solve the challenge I've already mentioned to. Yes, in the priorities, government priorities and the plans and strategies, we say mobilizing of financing, but it's not very clear which entity. Fine, there's Ministry of Finance. However, finance, especially if we look at from the perspective of the Green Climate Fund or maybe the Adaptation Fund, being a national designated authority, means that in dealing in terms of implementation, it has its own limitation. There are some areas it's not able to play. So as a bank, we are positioning ourselves to be able to play that role. That being said, we have challenges, of course, and some of these, Catherine, John, and Nadia have already mentioned them, and this is because this being relatively new space within the customers that we are dealing with, we are also doing a lot of handheld holding of some of these clients, and through collaborating with other agencies, for instance, national agencies, to be able to build capacity, not just in the actual design or mainstreaming, integrating these green technologies and practices within the businesses. However, the other challenges have been mainly in terms of management, general management, general governance of some of these projects. For instance, we are looking to...
Sarah?
Yes?
I think I have a couple of more people who want to come in. So
okay.
Thank you for sharing the perspective of UDB. And also I'm very excited that UDB is so active in this green space. I would like to ask Patricia Mito from the Uganda's Bankers Association, who also has a couple of questions or remarks, I think, more in this regard. Thank you, Sarah. Patricia, can you unmute yourself and then come to us?
Thank you, Reina, for the opportunity to share some of the thoughts from where we sit as the Ugandan Bankers Association. Just a brief, Ugandan Bankers Association is more or less the umbrella body for financial institutions that are supervised by the central bank. Our current membership is about 35 members. That's commercial banks, development banks, as well as some of the MDIs and MFIs. I like the discussion. As it went on, the thoughts that ran through my head were, how do we make this more systematic, sustainable, and ensure that we more or less bring as many financial institutions on board to appreciate the agenda and why the need to actually embark on contributing towards, besides just the business goals of the institutions, but appreciate that they have a role to play in terms of advancing other priorities within Uganda, economic, social, and environment. And I thought maybe what are some of the things that as an umbrella body, this program can actually support, or we can work with this program on, to create some kind of framework, principles that are more or less long-term. We're looking at how leadership, somebody mentioned something about leadership, what are some of the things we can do around that, leadership and governance. And I said, overall, promoting industry growth and development as a bigger picture. And then within that, we can, as the association, continue to handhold, of course, together working with the Delphi or other DFIs and development partners, support the respective institutions, continue to handhold them over a period of time to kind of integrate these initiatives that support the green agenda, whether it's climate change, whether it's agriculture, whether it's in tourism. How do we support, how can we work together to actually support the financial institutions get into this kind of space in a more sustainable way, that without long-term, if we don't have EU on board, these programs actually continue to run. Because I think the discussion that I had is we are reaching out to respective financial institutions. We want to open up lines of credit, but is there an appreciation from the leadership, from the governance level, of why we need to get into this kind of space? Yeah, that's what I really wanted to add.
Cool. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you very much. I think we have to come to an end. I still have a couple of questions for Catherine and also for Anna. And this is in regards to John's second point he stressed, and this was the web apps or IT applications to facilitate the financing. Do you have an example from KFW operations or from EIB's operations where you used such tools? I know EIB uses them in Europe because we work with them on it, but I think, like, is there examples also from Eastern Africa of such IT applications which facilitate green finance or SME finance as the web app? Maybe Anna, I can ask you first.
Thank you, Rainer. Speaking of our experience in Uganda, I don't think that we have anything like that in our portfolio at the moment, but this certainly is an interesting space to consider. And as we are staying in Uganda and we are having upcoming programs, I think it will be absolutely of relevance to look into them.
Thank you, Anna. And Catherine?
Yes, thank you. I mean, to my knowledge, and I'm not the expert, I don't think either, but I think digitalization is you know, as much as green finance is a driver, I mean, digitalization is also another driver. And, you know, as you said, if we have this type of things, or we are promoting this in Europe, there is no reason why we shouldn't do it here. And I think it's a good case to make as well, and look into that. It may be that some of the intermediaries with whom we are working do have that. That's something I would need to check more on a case-by-case basis in the detail. But I think it's a good avenue to follow, and it makes sense in the digital world in which we are operating. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I think John wanted to say some final remarks as well. Last input, John?
Yes, just to correct you, you asked me a question about simplifying. That's when I mentioned about digitizing the transactions. But we already have that platform for SMEs, not necessarily for those that are doing green enterprises, but just general SMEs. So that platform is already there. I talked to it, I was just telling you that, yes, we have solutions that are going to make the SMEs' lives easier, in that as long as they're doing certain things, making the bankings, making sure that the books are right, they can digitally access the funds even without coming to the brick and mortar of the bank. I just wanted to rectify that.
Okay, super. Thanks, John. Thanks for clarifying that. And I think that's maybe something we then can, taking from working with you with Equity Bank in Uganda, and maybe take it even these experiences to the European Union, because some of the banks who work with here in the European Union, they are sometimes not that advanced in this regard than what some banks in countries like Uganda do. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nadia. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, John. And thank you very much, Maggie, for organizing everything in the background. She has been very instrumental before, during, and after this whole event. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. Thank you for all the participants and the contributions. A couple of things I would like to say is that the call for applications of the Uganda Green Enterprise Finance Accelerator is open at the moment. So that's the non-financial support, which will then hopefully lead for at least